An old dossier thought to be asleep in the Los Angeles County Archives suddenly leaked. People didn't find blockbuster scripts or million-dollar contracts, but instead haunting autopsy reports about the deaths of Golden Age Hollywood stars. Those cold pages opened a chilling truth. Some screen idols were suspected of being forcibly injected to silence them. Some legends carried traces of radiation no one could explain, and others desperate turned to underground cosmetic surgeries and never returned from the operating table. So, which names appeared in these shocking autopsy files? And beneath the glittering lights, how many untold dark secrets remain? Everything will be laid bare in today's video. 1. Natalie Wood. The mysterious bruises on her body after the drowning. On a late night in November 1981, Catalina's sea was pitch black. The wind howled in gusts. The yacht Splendor lay at anchor, only a few dim lights flickering on deck. Natalie Wood, the radiant star of West Side Story, vanished into the night. By the next morning, her body washed ashore dressed in a thin nightgown hair, a tangled, waterlogged mess face ashen. The sight left even seasoned fishermen choked with grief. When the body was placed on the stainless steel table at the Los Angeles coroner's office, disturbing details emerged. This was not a simple drowning. On the left wrist, a dark bruise like the mark of a tight grip. The upper arms and thighs were mottled with purple, some shaped like fingerprints. A long streak on the right shin looked like an impact against something hard. The file noted multiple fresh bruises appearing immediately prior to death. A doctor later told the Los Angeles Times bluntly, "This was not an accident. These are signs of a struggle." Questions flared at once. Who was there in Natalie's final minutes? On the boat that night were Robert Wagner, the famously jealous husband, Christopher Walken, the younger co-star, and Captain Dennis Davern. It was Davern who later admitted on NBC's Today they argued. Furniture crashed. Then suddenly Natalie was gone. That testimony was a spark that set all Hollywood ablaze. A love triangle scandal hung over the death. Rumors said Natalie and Walken had a relationship more intimate than co-stars. Friends recalled she had confided that Wagner's jealousy often exploded into violence. People hinted that a tense love triangle unfolded that night. Meanwhile, Natalie had told a friend, "I'm afraid of water. I would never willingly jump off a boat." That line became indirect evidence, making the accidental fall theory harder to accept. In 2011, Los Angeles police suddenly reopened the case. The cause of death was changed from accident to undetermined. The New York Post ran a chilling headline, "Who pushed Natalie overboard?" The public seethed. Wagner, once praised as the perfect half, now stood under a harsh spotlight. Walken kept absolute silence, refusing comment. Davern became the lone witness, but his words came too late to uncover the truth. Natalie's funeral at Westwood Memorial Park drew thousands, jostling and weeping. Images of the young girl in Miracle on 34th Street and of Maria in West Side Story filled the newscasts, a stark contrast to the bruised body floating on the sea. The public not only mourned, they raged. How could a celebrated star die under such murky circumstances? And why does Hollywood still have no answer? Natalie Wood's death was not merely a drowning. It was a mystery, a suspected love crime, a tragedy woven of jealousy, power, and silence. The bruises on her body, even to this day, are like cold knocks from beneath Catalina's waves, reminding the world that the truth was buried with the tide. The suspicious death of Natalie Wood with those haunting bruises still hangs in the public's memory like a question without an answer. But Hollywood had once reeled from another tragedy, perhaps even more shocking, when another star was found in her private room amid a web of perplexing details. It was the most mysterious passing of all time, the case that makes the world shudder every time it's mentioned: Marilyn Monroe. 2. Marilyn Monroe. The mysterious death with an empty stomach and suspicions of forced injections. Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's golden icon, departed in a scene that left the world speechless. That night, ambulances flooded the lights around 12305 Fifth Helena Drive in Brentwood. Neighbors crowded the gate, and police rushed to break the locked door. When the bedroom was open, Monroe was found lying on the bed, one hand resting lightly on the phone that had slipped away. The scene was so chilling that a Los Angeles Times reporter at the site shuddered and said, "It looks like someone staged everything. Every detail is too perfect to call it a suicide." The autopsy report only deepened the shock. Tests showed barbiturate levels in Marilyn's blood and liver so high they could take down an elephant. But the strange part was that her stomach was completely empty. No pill fragments, no powder residue, nothing like a typical pill overdose. Dr. Thomas Noguchi, the notorious coroner to the stars, wrote clearly in his report, "This cannot be explained by typical oral ingestion. Something doesn't add up." Theories erupted immediately. Some doctors suggested the drugs were injected directly into a vein or even administered rectally to avoid leaving traces in the stomach. Rumors spread like wildfire through Los Angeles. Who had the power and coldness to stage such a clean death? The New York Times ran a bold headline: "The death of Marilyn Monroe leaves too many gaps." The names of President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy were pulled into the vortex of suspicion. People whispered that Marilyn knew too many national secrets, even private conversations about the Cuban crisis. In a later memoir, journalist Anthony Summers revealed Monroe once told friends she kept a red notebook recording everything she heard from the Kennedy brothers, and that could have been her death sentence. Not only that, years later, a nurse who was present that night went on NBC and recalled that when she saw Monroe's body, her first thought was of irregularity. It was too clean, too tidy, like a staged performance in which the victim had no choice. That statement hushed the studio, then unleashed a storm of conspiracy theories. Was this a political hit or mafia intervention? The same forces that once enmeshed Hollywood in a shadowy web, the fallout was beyond foreseeing. Monroe's death not only ended the life of the century's greatest beauty symbol, and it opened a door to darkness that Hollywood and the U.S. government did not want the public to see. In 1962, TV bulletins ran nonstop. Thousands of fans gathered outside the Brentwood home crying out her name. And to this day, more than 6 decades later, the questions surrounding her death have never been answered. Hollywood seemed used to scandal, but the Monroe shock forced an admission, no matter how dazzling the light. The darkness behind it is far more terrifying. And before they could recover just 3 years later, another star left this world not in a bedroom, but on a highway in a moment of tragedy that haunts the world. 3. James Dean, a face crushed in a Porsche crash. James Dean was not only the symbol of rebellion, he also embodied Hollywood's dread of fragile youth. The silver Porsche 550 Spider, bearing the words "Little Bastard," became a dare to destiny. As it sped along Highway 46 near Chalame, locals said they heard a long screech, then a cataclysmic collision with a Ford Tudor that thundered like a bomb. In that instant, the blazing light of a 24-year-old star went out. When Dean's body was taken to the San Luis Obispo morgue, the forensic team was horrified by the devastation. The 2 a.m. report detailed an unnaturally snapped neck, a chest burst open, a face so disfigured it was unrecognizable. His liver and spleen were pulverized, blood pooled through the abdomen. A pathologist later told the Los Angeles Times, "I had never seen a body so destroyed. It looked like it had come straight from a Nevada bomb test." But what haunted the public most was not just the injuries. That cold room became a doorway into the secrets Dean left behind. While police were still drafting reports, rumors spread through Los Angeles like wildfire. Dean was not only a rebel on screen, he was the secret lover of several powerful male stars. People named Marlon Brando, once hailed as the king of method acting. Confidential magazine revealed Dean had appeared many late nights at Brando's West Hollywood apartment when the streets were empty. Montgomery Clift, the star of A Place in the Sun, was also named. Some private letters between Dean and Clift were said to have vanished just days after the crash. Tab Hunter, Warner Bros.' golden boy, even confided to friends that Dean was the only one who made me feel not alone in this phony world. Playwright William Bast, a close friend and rumored lover, wrote years later in his memoir, "Jimmy told me he didn't care whether he loved men or women. What he feared most was loneliness." Paired with the autopsy report, those words made Dean's image even more enigmatic. A shattered body, and behind it, a heart desperate for love in the shadows. How did Hollywood react? Just a week after his death, Warner Brothers quietly sent people to retrieve all of Dean's personal papers from his small Sherman Oaks apartment. Neighbors said they saw trucks hauling away suitcases of letters, photos, and journals. The New York Post questioned, "Is Hollywood burying the truth about James Dean to protect its golden image?" Dean's death then was not just a tragic traffic accident. It became a symbol of sacrifice in an era when stars were forced to live 2 lives. One before the camera, dazzling and full of longing. One behind the curtains, quiet and full of secrets. Decades have passed, but whenever Dean is mentioned, people remember not only the defiant gaze in Rebel Without a Cause, but also the cold autopsy pages, the rumors of hidden relationships, and a Hollywood that did everything to hide whatever didn't fit its glossy image. And then, soon after, another star, the true queen of the red carpet, also appeared in the autopsy room. But instead of bones shattered by a crash, her heart stood as a tragic witness to drug surgeries and decay from within. 4. Elizabeth Taylor. The Queen's heart stopped after 30 surgeries. Elizabeth Taylor was once called Hollywood's queen, a magnificent icon with legendary violet eyes and massive diamonds. But what was revealed in the autopsy room at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in 2011 chilled even the steeliest observers. The report showed a heart enlarged to 1.5 times normal size valves, stiff and weak. Inside lay swaths of scar tissue, traces of dozens of surgeries, some the public never knew. Brain surgery, partial bowel resection, even a failed experimental bone marrow transplant. Her liver had degenerated, her kidneys had shriveled, clear signs of decades of morphine, Valium, and Demerol. A doctor present at the post-mortem told the Los Angeles Times, "When we opened her chest, we saw a battlefield, a body ravaged by scalpels and drugs. What shocked the public most was the discovery in her lungs multiple scars from a secret anti-cancer treatment in 2006 that the family had never disclosed." The coroners also noted repeated cosmetic interventions from chest and waist to cheekbones to keep a youthful look under the camera's gaze. Many journalists concluded that even in death, Taylor still bore the pressure to be perfect that Hollywood had chained her to for life. At the same time, private life rumors exploded. Beyond 8 marriages to powerful men, many sources claimed Taylor had a profound relationship with Kay Thompson, the singer and longtime friend. Medical notes even recorded that Taylor suffered prolonged, severe depression due to conflicts over gender identity and a secret love life. The Daily Mail didn't hesitate to headline Elizabeth Taylor took to the grave a broken heart and forbidden love secrets. The aftermath left the world stunned. The public used to Taylor's radiant image in a violet gown at Cannes in 2002, or the elegance of her lavish wedding photos had to face the truth beneath the diamonds and the glow her body had fallen apart beyond repair. The autopsy room became the place where the cold truth was unmasked. Even a queen pays a terrible price for fame, for drugs, and for secrets kept for a lifetime. And then, as Hollywood had yet to recover from Elizabeth Taylor's ravaged heart, another man, Marlon Brando, shocked the public again. Not with violet eyes, but with a massive body, surgical scars, and long-hidden secrets of same-sex relationships. 5. Marlon Brando. Morbid obesity and secret surgical scars kept out of sight. Everyone who had stepped into the autopsy room at UCLA Medical Center in 2004 told of the same feeling, breathless shock. Before them lay a swollen body, over 150 kilograms, wrinkled skin, a distended belly, a puffed face as if it had endured an unequal battle. And when the name tag at the neck flipped into view, the room went silent. It was Marlon Brando, once revered by the world. The autopsy report was not just dry description. It read like a harsh indictment: a badly damaged liver, lungs ravaged by chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, clear signs of decades of smoking and overindulgence. But what startled the doctors most were the long, winding scars across the abdomen and chest. No public hospital record had ever acknowledged them. An anonymous nurse said bluntly on CBS he secretly underwent multiple weight loss surgeries. At one point, they even removed part of his stomach. It all happened in the shadows, as if Brando were trying to flee his own body. Journalist Peter Manso, author of Brando the Biography, commented that his body looked like a map of illness and concealment. The Los Angeles Times described it coldly, a legend swallowed by his own weight. What shocked the public even more was that only a few years earlier, Brando had still appeared on television in oversized suits, his deep voice sounding as authoritative as Don Corleone. It had all been careful theater to shield him from the world's gaze. The autopsy revealed more unexpected details. Chest sutures indicated heart surgery, a rare pancreatic procedure, and multiple treatments for diabetic complications, all kept from public view. That secrecy only fueled the question: was Brando fighting not only disease, but also the fear of losing his image? People remember Brando for explosive performances, for eyes that set the screen ablaze. But the autopsy room laid bare a cold truth: the Godfather was not invincible. He was a frail man betrayed by his own body, leaving surgical scars behind like a final confession. And that very contrast hit even harder when attention turned to another matinee idol, Paul Newman, whose blazing blue eyes once captivated millions. Because on the autopsy table, Newman's lungs were so pitch black that doctors compared them to a coal mine. 6. Paul Newman. Coal-black lungs from cigarettes. The truth surfaced only under the scalpel. Cigarette smoke had followed Paul Newman since his earliest days in Hollywood. In the 1950s, Newman's backstage image was often paired with a cigarette loosely tucked at the corner of his mouth. A Life magazine reporter once captured him smoking 3 cigarettes in a row while waiting for the director to set a shot. Colleagues remembered Newman could end a shoot day with an empty pack and a few glasses of bourbon. That habit wasn't just style, it had hardened into addiction. Years later, at the height of his fame with Cool Hand Luke and the Sting, Newman still carried the image of the nonchalant man whose cigarette glowed in scene after scene. Hollywood turned smoke into a symbol of masculinity, and Newman was its poster face. Few imagined that inside his body was being destroyed day by day. The autopsy after his death in Westport, Connecticut in 2008 laid the truth bare. Newman's lungs had no hint of pink, left only a pitch-black mass as if caked with coal. His bronchi were packed with tar so stiff that when the scalpel cut in, it sounded like a saw ripping wood. A coroner later told the New York Times, "I've operated on coal miners in Pennsylvania, but I've never seen the lungs of a movie star this black. They were heavy and reeked of tar." The consequences of that habit were devastating. Newman's liver and kidneys were badly affected after decades of filtering toxins. The chest vessels had hardened, and his heart worked to exhaustion enough for doctors to note signs of chronic heart failure. The painful part was that Newman never publicly disclosed his condition. He still appeared on red carpets, blue eyes, bright voice firm, while inside his lungs had become a coal pit. In his will, Newman left a brief but haunting line: "If I die from cigarettes, consider it a warning." When the autopsy report leaked in the Los Angeles Times, that line instantly became a headline on CNN, NBC, and across major papers. The public reeled. The man, once considered the epitome of elegance, had died from the very habit that helped define his image. That truth turned Paul Newman's death into a slap across Hollywood's face, the place that once made cigarettes a seductive accessory on screen, leaving immeasurable consequences for a whole generation. If Paul Newman was a slow death from a self-destructive habit, then Steve McQueen offered a completely different picture. A reckless star willing to risk his life in underground operating rooms in Mexico just to seize a little more time. 7. Steve McQueen. The haunting traces of an underground surgery in Mexico. In the memories of millions, Steve McQueen was always the defiant king of cool, with eyes half cold, half challenging. But by the autumn of 1980, that image was a thing of the past. His body was gnawed by mesothelioma, with tumors as big as balls pressing the very breath from him. The top hospitals in Los Angeles, Houston, and even the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota refused to intervene, insisting he would not survive a major operation. Desperate, McQueen made a choice no one expected. He secretly crossed the border to Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, to find an obscure doctor who performed surgeries considered outside the law. The operating room McQueen trusted was described like an old storage closet: a flickering surgical lamp, moldy walls, rusty instruments, even a faint smell of cigarette smoke in the air. Yet that was where a star once worth millions of dollars chose to entrust his life. A Mexican nurse later told ABC News, "He was trembling, but before the anesthesia, he whispered softly, 'I have to try, because I've got nothing left to lose.'" The operation began at night. The Mexican doctor opened his abdomen, pulled a massive tumor from his lungs and belly, then stitched him up hastily with rough, coarse sutures. No modern machines, no professional recovery. By morning, McQueen's final breath faded on a rickety wooden bed. His body was taken to the morgue just hours later. Doctors opened his chest and immediately found his lungs coated with asbestos fibers, the legacy of his youth in shipyards. His liver had swollen to twice normal size, his kidneys had shrunk, signs of a body exhausted by medication. But the most shocking was the abdomen, a long incision, blood seeping, red stitches still oozing thick threads like a hastily patched tear. A coroner in Chihuahua wrote in the file, "I've never seen a star's body bearing such brutal marks across the belly. It looked like a patient abandoned at a night market." The New York Post called it the most reckless death of the king of cool. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Times ran an editorial, "Why would a Hollywood legend with a fortune of millions cross into Mexico for an underground operation in squalid conditions only to collapse in despair? America was shaken." People realized that McQueen, the star who once thrilled the world with breathtaking car chases, died in silence with a body scarred and sloppily stitched. The air in that Mexican autopsy room was described as heavy with despair. The doctors were not only dissecting a corpse, they were laying open a tragedy Hollywood could make a man immortal on screen, but could not save him in real life. And when McQueen was brought back to the U.S. in a cold coffin, people grasped that fame cannot stop time's destruction. But before Hollywood could recover from that scarred body, another shock struck. Humphrey Bogart. The man of Casablanca entered the autopsy room reduced to skin and bones, weighing less than 40 kilograms, leaving the film world stunned. 8. Humphrey Bogart, a body weighing under 40 kilograms. Aside from those eyes, everything else was gone. Lauren Bacall said that when she remembered her husband's last days, it was not only the private pain of a widow, it later became a bitter summary of what was seen in the autopsy room. At New York Presbyterian Hospital in January 1957, when Humphrey Bogart's body was wheeled into the cold room, the air froze. The coroners present knew they stood before a cinematic monument, but on the steel table lay only a wasted body weighing under 40 kilograms. Pale gray skin clung tight to a jagged bone frame, ribs jutting, throat-hollowed eyes sunk into dark sockets. The autopsy revealed a cruel truth. End-stage esophageal cancer had destroyed his swallowing passage, leaving him almost unable to eat in his final months. Bogart's lungs were pitch black from smoke. When cut, they released a tarry stench. The bronchial walls were hardened, lung tissue crumbled like ash. His liver had shrunk to half normal size, its surface lumpy with fibrotic nodules, the legacy of countless nights of whiskey and gin. His heart was weak chambers, thin walls trembling like a withered leaf. A doctor noted, "This body is the clearest proof that tobacco and alcohol can eat a person away to the very end." That habit wasn't born overnight. Since the 1930s behind the Warner Bros. Sets, Bogart was known for the cigarette always on his lip. Colleagues said he could finish a pack before noon, then sit in bars at night, whiskey followed by martinis. Hollywood abetted that habit. On set, cigarettes were mandatory props to craft masculinity. Alcohol for Bogart was a confidant through grueling shoots. Each puff, each drink amassed into a death sentence signed decades earlier. In the last days, Lauren Bacall described her husband as only the shadow of bogey. He couldn't swallow even a spoonful of porridge. Doctors placed a feeding tube directly into his stomach. His body shrank so quickly that friends cried at the sight. Some wouldn't enter the room for fear of erasing the memory of the once dashing man. On the autopsy table, the feeding tube mark remained. His stomach was hollow arms, skin and bone fingernails dark from long hypoxia. The news spread. New York sank into mourning. The next day, New York Daily News headlined "The Most Tragic Curtain Fall of a Legend." Variety wrote Bogey left in a skeleton, but his image is immortal on the silver screen. Thousands lined up outside Frankie Campbell Funeral Home where his coffin lay. Many held half-burned cigarettes as a final farewell. The cause, the reason, the consequence, everything was clear, a life gnawed by smoke and drink. A wasted body left on the coroner's slab, and a film world bidding farewell to one of its greatest icons with shock and regret. People mourned not only his talent, but the bitter truth: Humphrey Bogart was killed by the very habits Hollywood once glorified. Bogart's passing was a harsh warning. Glamour cannot mask the ravages of disease and tobacco. And before the public recovered just 3 years later, they witnessed another shock: the downfall of the king of Hollywood, Clark Gable, with a heart 2 decades older than his years. 9. Clark Gable. A heart swollen and aged 20 years by stress and cigarettes. Clark Gable, the man who made millions of women catch their breath with that half smile in Gone with the Wind, entered film history as the king of Hollywood. But in his final years, that halo became a burden. On the 1960 set of The Misfits, Gable worked alongside Marilyn Monroe and Montgomery Clift, 2 famously unstable stars. The press called the set a battlefield of nerves, Monroe perpetually late from sedatives, Clift drowning in drink. Nearly 60, Gable tried to maintain his authority, but after each tense scene he would step off set light, a cigarette, gulp black coffee, and return. Friends said that during that shoot alone he doubled his intake from 4 packs a day to 6. The price came quickly. Just 12 days after The Misfits wrapped, the king of Hollywood collapsed at his Beverly Hills home after crushing chest pain. When his body was examined at New York Presbyterian Hospital, doctors faced a terrifying sight. His chest opened, the heart was swollen to twice normal size, dark red like a balloon about to burst. His coronary arteries were hardened, their walls plastered with chalky plaques, leaving blood to trickle through narrow slits. The chief coroner wrote, "This is not the heart of a 59-year-old man, but of an 80-year-old aged and decayed." His liver showed exhaustion. His stomach was crisscrossed with ulcers from strong coffee and liquor used to stay alert. The cause was obvious. Gable was a heavy smoker, at least 4 packs of Camel a day plus nightly bourbon. The pressure of maintaining a kingly image in public, compounded by relentless set stress, turned his heart into a time bomb. Friends said that in his final days, he even told a cameraman, "I'm no longer Rhett Butler. I'm just an old man fighting not to collapse in front of the camera." His death shocked America. When NBC's Evening News broke the story, millions fell silent. On CBS, Walter Cronkite began, "Aye, a king has fallen, crushed by his own crown." His funeral in Los Angeles drew thousands along the boulevards. Many women fainted as the flag-draped coffin left the church. Newsstands overflowed with Rhett Butler embracing Scarlett O'Hara beneath the line. Hollywood has lost its last king. The public not only grieved, they recoiled at the autopsy's truth: a heart aged 20 years beyond its time, arteries petrified, a body ravaged by drink and smoke. The man once the template of masculinity died in exhaustion, his heart bursting under the invisible weight the world placed on him. But the tragedy didn't end there. While Gable fell to an aged heart, another star, Judy Garland, entered the autopsy room weighing only 36 kilograms, a testament to Hollywood's cruelty in forcing a naive teenager into sleeping pill abuse since youth. 10. Judy Garland, traces of sleeping pill abuse since adolescence. In the memories of millions, Judy Garland is forever the girl Dorothy singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" in The Wizard of Oz. But in life, Judy's rainbow never truly existed. From adolescence, she was dragged down a road with no exit, where sleeping pills, stimulants, and the pressure of Hollywood's power brokers devoured her youth. In June 1969, when staff found Judy motionless in her small Belgravia, London apartment, the tragic end had come. Her body was taken to the morgue, and what appeared left even seasoned coroners speechless. Only 36 kilograms, ribs like blades under the skin, fingernails purple from lack of oxygen, hair falling out in clumps. The report stated barbiturate levels far beyond safety. Cause of death: chronic overdose leading to heart and respiratory failure. A cold but haunting note was added by the pathologist, a 47-year-old star, but the body of a long-starved teenager. Worse was what the liver and stomach revealed. Layers of internal scarring showed Judy had depended on sleeping pills since age 14. Former colleagues recalled MGM forced her to take diet pills, sleeping pills, and stimulants. By day, assistants slipped her pep pills to film for 14 straight hours. At night, studio doctors forced barbiturates to sleep fast to be ready for the morning shoot. An actor of the era remembered on CBS, they handed Judy pills like candy. She just obeyed because it was the only way to stay on set. That forced routine became addiction. Judy grew up on pills, as dependent as on air. When MGM pulled away, the scars were already carved in her body: a failing liver, a torn stomach, a shattered nervous system. The autopsy was only the final unveiling of a tragedy sown when she was still an innocent girl. Her death shocked Britain. Daily Mirror ran the bitter headline, "From Rainbow to Darkness." On the BBC, a reporter broke down while reading, "The girl who once sang of hope has died alone, her body destroyed by the very pills Hollywood thrust into her hands." Her New York funeral drew more than 20,000 fans. Many young women carried roses and sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" through tears. Garland's passing didn't just close a career, it opened a fierce debate. Did studios have the right to warp the childhoods of young talents with drugs and inhuman schedules? Hollywood never answered, but Judy's body spoke for all: a skeleton of skin and bone, a heart rotted by pills, and a rainbow dream snuffed out at its birth. Judy Garland's tragedy closed like a cold verdict on the system that warped her youth. But Hollywood had no time to grieve. It faced another truth this time, not from sleeping pills or youthful pressure, but from cigarettes, hard liquor, and the shadowy power orbiting a legend. And the name that once shook Las Vegas nightly now lay on the coroner's table: Frank Sinatra. 11. Frank Sinatra. Fibrotic lungs and ravaged arteries from cigarettes. Frank Sinatra, old blue eyes to the world, always stepped on stage in a sharp suit with a confident smile and a glass of whiskey in hand. Las Vegas erupted whenever that warm voice lifted "My Way." The public believed he was immortal, that this man would forever be America's living soundtrack. Yet, when he died in Los Angeles in May 1998, the coroner's door opened on a very different truth, one as cold as it was merciless. The autopsy described in detail Sinatra's lungs were severely fibrotic. The tissue hardened like stone airways nearly sealed by tar built up over decades. When the scalpel cut, pitch-black clumps appeared like dried asphalt. A doctor on the case told the New York Post bluntly, "Each time the blade touched, it felt like cutting a solid block, not human lungs." But that wasn't all. The legend's heart was no less ravaged. Blood vessels were up to 90%, blocked their walls thick with deposits, the heart muscle thin and weak like torn cloth. The report read, "Heart failure due to severe atherosclerosis." In other words, Sinatra did not die of old age alone. Decades of cigarettes, hard liquor, and stress had pushed his body to decay. What shattered the public was the contrast. On stage, Sinatra laughed, joked on talk shows, threw an arm around Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. in those legendary Rat Pack nights. It was a mask. Inside, he carried an exhausted body and a heart ready to burst at any moment. And as the coroner's door closed, old rumors stirred again. Sinatra was not just a singer. He was said to have close ties to the mafia, those who boosted his Las Vegas career in exchange for nights of booze, cigarettes, and backroom deals. His death from coal-black lungs and a failing heart led many to remark bitterly he sang "My Way." But the mafia and cigarettes chose another path for him. CNN opened its broadcast that day. A golden voice has gone silent, leaving the question, did power, hard liquor, and the mafia help shape this death? The Los Angeles Times called Sinatra's passing the final curtain for a man who gambled too big with fate. America mourned. Tens of thousands poured into the streets for the Beverly Hills funeral. But alongside grief, they recognized a harsh truth. Even legends, even the voice that enchanted the world cannot escape a death warrant written in smoke-strong drink and infamous entanglements. And as Sinatra was laid to rest, Hollywood was jolted again by another giant, John Wayne. The Duke, the legendary cowboy, seemed unbreakable, yet inside him lurked an invisible enemy radiation from the very desert sets where he had made his name. 12. John Wayne, a body irradiated by the Nevada desert. When John Wayne's chest was opened in the autopsy room at UCLA Medical Center in 1979, the doctors were stunned. The Duke's massive lungs no longer held the pink of life. Instead, there were dark, fibrotic patches with cancerous tissue spreading from the stomach all the way into the lung cavity. But what shocked them most were the abnormal radiation readings in the tissue samples. One of the coroners wrote bluntly, "The body bears signs of prolonged radiation exposure." Memories flooded back across Hollywood. In 1954, Wayne and the crew of the Conqueror camped for months in the Nevada desert, less than 200 kilometers from the Yucca Flats nuclear test site. At the time, the U.S. government reassured everyone that the area was absolutely safe. Yet decades later, the statistics chilled the world. More than 90 members of the crew developed various cancers, among them Wayne, Susan Hayward, Pedro Armendariz, and director Dick Powell. Behind-the-scenes photos released later became a grim testament. John Wayne riding across gray sands, while in the distance columns of radioactive dust from atomic tests still lingered. Those invisible particles clung to skin, seeped through pores, slipped into lungs, and blood, planting a death sentence that wouldn't be read for 25 years. Public reaction when the autopsy report leaked was fierce. The Los Angeles Times called it Hollywood's nuclear legacy. The New York Times wrote, "John Wayne didn't die of old age, he died because of a movie." Americans were shaken. The masculine icon, the man unbreakable on screen, had fallen to invisible dust. Talk shows filled with debate. Did the government know the risks and still allow the production to film beside a nuclear test site? Wayne's funeral in California drew tens of thousands. Many wept not only for the loss of the Western hero, but because the truth was that he hadn't died from bullets or ordinary illness, but from radiation, an invisible enemy Hollywood once chose to ignore. John Wayne's death became a haunting curse. The bright light of the soundstage can sometimes hide a deadly cloud of dust. And as the public struggled to digest that nuclear legacy, another shock was waiting. Burt Lancaster, the star once hailed as the golden face of the 1950s, entered the autopsy room with a heart crisscrossed by scars revealing secrets buried for decades. 13. Burt Lancaster. The autopsy file reveals strokes hidden in the dark. In audiences' memories, Burt Lancaster embodied masculine power, broad shoulders, blazing eyes, and a smile bright enough to light a theater. He once brought crowds to their feet in From Here to Eternity and stunned critics with Birdman of Alcatraz. But when the autopsy room door in Los Angeles closed in 1994, the legend appeared utterly changed, fragile, depleted, and full of secrets. The autopsy report exposed a chilling truth. Lancaster's heart was dense with scar tissue. Every rough ridge on the myocardium marked the aftershock of small strokes over many years. The scars overlapped like silent cuts, proving his body had failed. Again and again, only the audience was never allowed to know. A medical staffer present told the Los Angeles Times. He staggered more than once, backstage eyes going dark, but every time he stepped before the camera, he flashed that radiant smile as if nothing had happened. Why did the public never hear of it? Because Lancaster's medical records were locked tight. Any news of his condition was blocked before it could leak. His manager and inner circle worked to keep it secret because a frail Burt Lancaster could never align with the unyielding hero image Hollywood had built. Scandal swelled as people dug into his private life. Rumors of hidden relationships, of closeted same-sex affairs, of a murky friendship with Rock Hudson, all were woven together with the autopsy file. Some said the strokes weren't just from cigarettes and stress, but from the crushing psychological pressure of living two lives, the on-screen Burt Lancaster and the true Burt Lancaster, lonely and terrified of exposure. Critic Leonard Maltin, after reading the autopsy report, choked up on Entertainment Tonight. A legend died with a heart ground down in silence. None of us imagined how much he endured. When the news broke, the public was stunned. Headlines blared, "Burt Lancaster, the hero felled by a rotting heart." Fans wept, but they also felt betrayed. It turned out Hollywood had hidden a sick, shaking Lancaster in stroke after stroke to keep selling the image of an immortal god. Burt Lancaster died, leaving a cold message. Hollywood doesn't just create legends, it will also cover up the truth to protect them. And before the audience could catch its breath, Ava Gardner, the beauty icon who once left America spellbound, was revealed on the autopsy table as a body ravaged by liquor and smoke. 14. Ava Gardner. A cirrhotic liver, ruined lungs, and a hidden alcoholism revealed only after death. Ava Gardner was once hailed as the most beautiful woman on the planet. From deep brown eyes to that proud curve of a lip, she made the most powerful men in America kneel. Frank Sinatra abandoned career and family to pursue her to the end, and Howard Hughes, the eccentric tycoon, went mad enough to bankroll teams of detectives to track her every step. Ava was not just a star, she was a whirlwind of desire and power. Yet when death came in a small London apartment in 1990, the truth laid the world bare. The autopsy showed Gardner's body exhausted after decades of burning itself down with cigarettes and hard liquor. The liver was cirrhotic, the lungs badly damaged, and her final breath bore the imprint of tens of thousands of cigarettes. The cold figures in the medical file stood in brutal contrast to memories of a goddess striding proudly along the red carpets of Cannes and Venice. Friends said that in her final years, Ava often sat alone in a room at the Ritz, a whiskey glass never absent from the table. She drank even when her body trembled, even as doctors begged her to stop. Once she laughed bitterly to a friend, "If not for alcohol, what else could I lean on to get through one more day?" It sounded like a pre-written epitaph. The public reeled not only at the physical collapse, but because old affairs thundered back to life. They remembered the burning romance with Sinatra so volatile he once nearly ended his life when she said goodbye. They remembered Hughes, who spent a fortune to keep her under control and still failed. And all those powerful men who had once knelt to Gardner, none were there when she fell. Ava Gardner's death exposed a brutal truth. A goddess who once intoxicated Hollywood ended as a withered body gnawed day by liquor and smoke. The image made the public shudder and grieve at once, pitying a beauty icon and recoiling at the terrifying price of glory and passion. But the tragedy didn't end there. As the world argued over Gardner, another goddess, Rita Hayworth, was laid bare in the autopsy room, her brain shrunken by Alzheimer's, erasing the radiant image the public had worshipped. 15. Rita Hayworth. A shrunken brain from Alzheimer's, the harsh truth behind the drunk label. Rita Hayworth, a name that filled 1940s Hollywood with applause. In Gilda, a single toss of her hair or flash of her radiant smile could silence an entire theater. That image carved itself into public memory, a magnificent, confident woman walking into the light as if the world existed to behold her. But as life neared its end, that light went out. Instead of fluent lines, Rita began to forget her cues, hesitating even on set. Her steps faltered, her speech broke apart, sometimes she couldn't form a full sentence. The tabloids showed no mercy, pinning on her the cold label of alcoholic. The public believed a one-time idol was losing herself to drink, and no one wanted to hear another explanation. When Rita died in New York in 1987, the autopsy told a shocking truth: her brain had atrophied severely, end-stage Alzheimer's. The lobes had shrunken, memory had been stripped to the core. Rita's body was not shaped by alcohol, but was the victim of a disease that had slowly eroded everything: her craft, her memory, even her dignity. In her last years, images of Rita were heartbreaking. She sat quietly in a small apartment, eyes clouded, sometimes looking at her daughter and asking, "Who is Mother?" Paparazzi captured those moments and sold them across newsstands. The world kept believing she had fallen to drink when, in truth, her mind had been stolen long before. That terrible contrast to Gilda, who once ensnared millions, now reduced to a thin frame with vanishing memories, left the public in stunned silence. The New York Times wrote, "Hollywood was wrong. Rita did not destroy herself. She was the victim of a disease that turned a blazing star into a painful shadow." Rita Hayworth's death closed a tragic paradox. A legend can live forever on screen, but in real life, Rita spent her final years a stranger to herself. When that truth spread, the world was aghast. Never had the gulf between blazing light and withering darkness been cut so deep. Stage lights can turn a person into a legend, but the autopsy room reveals them in the most literal sense: fragile bodies drowned by time, habits, and secrets. Each autopsy report is a cold reminder that no one escapes the final truth. And you, among these 15 shocking truths, which detail haunts you most, how many other Hollywood secrets do you think remain buried? Leave a comment below so we can talk it through together. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss the chilling yet captivating stories from Hollywood's backstage.